I'd like to welcome you all here today to the start of the Life is for Living webinar series. Today we have Edel Curran. Edel works for Epilepsy Ireland and she will be talking about understanding epilepsy. Edel has great experience of both epilepsy from a personal background, from a work background, and also from her experience of working with Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Ireland as a family support worker and family support manager for a lot of years. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Edel, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this presentation for us, Edel. And I hope everybody finds the information as useful and as interesting as we have found it when we've done it. Okay, so thank you. Now, Edel, I'm handing you the reins.
See me, and I am going to share my screen, and hopefully this will all go very smoothly, and I will bring you in. Okay, entire screen. Okay. So you should be able to see my slides there. So you should be able to see it there now. So that's who I am, Edel Curran, and I'm the Community Resource Officer with Epilepsy Ireland. I cover the North Dublin and Kildare area, and my contact details are there if anybody wants to contact me. But like that, we have got community resource officers throughout the country. So if you are from the Midlands or the South, the Southeast, and we will have a community resource officer, my colleagues in them areas that you can contact. And my email address is also there if anybody wants to follow up with me by email or by phone afterwards. So that's where it is. And Katie has given me a good description there in when she was introducing me, saying what my background is. And I know some of you here may be familiar with me from when I worked with Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Ireland up until 2015. So what I'm going to be covering today are the definitions of epilepsy and seizures and kind of simplifying things so that it's very easy to understand. It can be complicated. It's a lot of information to take in, and especially if you already have another diagnosis of spina bifida and or hydrocephalus as well, it's kind of an extra thing that you're going, okay, what do I need to know? So hopefully we will get through this today and you'll be able to understand a bit more about epilepsy. So I'll also cover some epilepsy facts, and that will be done very quickly. It's one slide and I'll fly through them. And then when it starts to get a bit more content heavy is when we come into the seizure classifications, and I will talk through each of the different seizures that a person may have who has epilepsy. I'll also be covering the treatment of epilepsy. So how is it treated? And I suppose we'll look at also the triggers of seizures, along with we'll speak about ways of actually minimising the amount of seizures that a person can have through lifestyle and managing your own epilepsy and your condition. So, and I think that one of the more important things is the very bottom one is dealing with a seizure. And from today, I hope that you will feel a bit more confident if a seizure is to happen for your child, for yourself, for your family member, that you will know that I'm following the procedure, I'm following the steps to manage the seizure and give you that confidence to manage it really well and know that you're doing the best that you can to care for your family member. So that's what we're going to be covering. So I'm going to head on over into the definitions here now. So what is epilepsy? Epilepsy is an umbrella term. So it covers a lot of different things, but what it is in a very simple sentence, it's a tendency for recurrent seizures that originate in the brain. So the important thing to take from this is recurrent seizures. So it's not somebody who has one seizure. Generally, they have to see a pattern of seizures, but they also have to be able to pinpoint that this activity is stemming from a disturbance in the brain and in the electrical activity in the brain. So there are other conditions that can look similar to epilepsy or look similar to a seizure. It could be diabetes related, but that's not originating in the brain. That is down to the blood sugars. Heart conditions as well could be another one that the person would look like they're having a seizure, when in fact it could be that their heart is irregular. But they're able to pinpoint that it's actually coming from somewhere else physical in the body. So they have to be able to see a pattern of recurrent seizures, and they're able to pinpoint that that disturbance is coming from the brain activity at that time. Okay, so that's epilepsy as a definition. And then what is a seizure? So a seizure is a very brief temporary malfunction of normal brain activity. Because some seizures could be a couple of seconds, some could be a couple of minutes. And the majority of seizures are over and done with in the space of maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And some people will have longer seizures where it's pushing up closer to a 5-minute seizure. But the majority are very quick. And what happens is our brains are constantly sending signals across through the neurons. So there's always electrical activity in our brains. But if that electrical activity gets a bit excited, that's where the seizure will happen. So, and it is within the brain, and also what happens after a seizure and the person recovers, normal brain activity resumes once they've recovered. For some people, the recovery could be a couple of minutes. For others, if it's a bigger seizure, it could take a couple of hours for that person to fully come back around and be alert and be aware of what's going on around them. But seizures, they're self-limiting. They will start themselves, and like that, in most cases, they will actually finish themselves as well. So they'll limit themselves to the couple of seconds or to the minute and a half or whatever is normal for your child or for yourself, okay? So a seizure is a brief and temporary malfunction of normal brain activity. Okay. So just to talk you through some of the epilepsy facts. So 1 in 20 people could have a single seizure at some time in their life. And if you remember back to the definition where it's recurrent seizures, the reason they go with the recurrent seizures is that 1 in 20 people will have a single seizure at some stage. So if you think of your family, your extended family, I know I come from a very big family, and there is, I think when you add in cousins and aunts and uncles, you're looking at 60, 70 people on one side. So it's a massive amount of people. So if they were to diagnose on that first initial seizure, there'd be a lot of people that are being treated for epilepsy, and chances are they're in that 1 in 20 category. So they want to see the recurrent seizures happen. Okay, but epilepsy, it is actually a very common condition, and they estimate that there's in around 40,000 people in Ireland, and anybody who's really good at maths, which I'm not, that breaks down to 1 in every 115 people have epilepsy. So think of a secondary school in Ireland, and there's 1,500 students. A big primary school could have 600-700 students. So chances are there are a number of children in the schools that have a diagnosis of epilepsy. So it's very common. Epilepsy can start at any stage. It could be in childhood. It could be right up to the age of 18, but it can also happen at any stage in life. So you could be in your 20s and 30s, have no history of having seizures, and they can just come out of the blue for some people. But like that, we would see an increase in people up to the age of 18 and after the age of 65 who would develop epilepsy at them stages. And what's happening within the brain at that stage. So if you think up until the age of 18, the brain is developing and it continues to develop. And then after the age of 65 is when there's changes in the brain where things are slowing down, and that could be the cause of the actual epilepsy to start at that stage. So it can be more common in people who have an intellectual or learning disability, and I also know that it can also be quite common for people who have spina bifida and hydrocephalus to have epilepsy as an add-on condition, and that needs extra care, and they also need to have treatment for their epilepsy as well. So it can be quite common, and I know from working with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, I am very aware of a lot of families that the spina bifida and the hydrocephalus can be quite time heavy. So it's kind of giving them that time, giving you the information about epilepsy to help you to manage that side of the condition as well as possible. Okay, the next one says approximately 70% of people will become seizure-free on the preventative medication that they are put on. And in most cases, that could be the first or the second medication that they try. So a lot of people, when they're diagnosed with epilepsy, they start on their treatment. They might never see another seizure after that. So that's the nice statistic, I suppose, is to realize that 70% of people become seizure-free. We would do a lot of work with people who are new to the diagnosis. So they would come, they'd get their information, get some training around learning about epilepsy and also the emergency medication. And they head off, and we may never hear from that person ever again, because like that, their child or their family member has become seizure-free just on the preventative medication. But there are that smaller amount of people where they continue to have seizures and they have difficulty managing it, and they may have more than one medication to try to manage the seizures. But like that, a lot of people with epilepsy in the community are in the 70%. So you would never know that they have a diagnosis of epilepsy because it's very well managed and their quality of life is quite good as well. So the last point on that slide is that there is a small number of people each year that would die from SUDEP, so that's sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. The numbers are very small, but it's also important to say that epilepsy may be something that could risk you passing away. So we would have very small numbers each year. But if you think back to when you're in the maternity hospital and you're coming home with your new baby, they will always ensure that you're aware of the possibility of cot death. So I'm not trying to compare the two, but it's about making sure that you have the information. And what SUDEP is they cannot find an explanation for why the person passed away. They didn't fall over, bang their head and had a huge trauma. So the person passed away and there's no other explanation, only for the fact that they have a diagnosis of epilepsy. So it's not to frighten anybody, but it's just to make sure that people are aware of it, because it is very much not spoken about in the hospitals, because there can be so much information being fired at the family at the early stages. So this is just to kind of put that awareness out there. And like that, if anybody wants to come back to me and talk to me about, okay, how can we minimize risks? Because like that, there are ways that you can minimize the risk of SUDEP happening. So, and we have a really good booklet on our website. It's our Safety and Seizures booklet. And it goes through a section on SUDEP, which will look at what can I do to minimize that risk. Okay, so just about keeping yourself safe throughout your epilepsy diagnosis. So epilepsy, what causes it? For some people, and the 40% of people, they'll be able to say, right, there's a structural issue within the brain. So it could be a birth trauma, infections in the brain. So let's say meningitis, encephalitis, injury, tumor, or stroke. Okay, so these people will know what has caused their epilepsy. Hydrocephalus is also one there. They'll be able to pinpoint, well, this can actually happen because of the diagnosis. But there are also a huge amount of people that are never able to pinpoint what started their epilepsy, what started them to have seizures. And they are always doing research into trying to find more causes for it. And like that, it could be a genetic issue there, where there's like the genes kind of, when they mix together, something didn't blend in. But like that, in a lot of cases, people never find out what the actual cause of their epilepsy diagnosis is. And I don't know which is the better category to be in, whether it's the 40% who know what caused it or the 60% who do not know what the cause is for their diagnosis. So it's just to be aware of it. There is not always a reason that they can give you why you developed epilepsy. Okay, so apologies, this slide looks very text heavy. But I'm going to break it down as easily as possible. And then all the ones on the bottom of this slide, I will be going into more detail on further slides as well. If you look at the top there on the left-hand side, you'll see the picture of the brain, and there's one area of it highlighted in red. So that's our focal or the partial seizures. So new terminology is now that they're called focal seizures, but they're still the exact same as what the previous names were. It's just how they're actually termed now at this point through the new classifications. So if you have a focal seizure, your focal seizure could be that first one there, the focal aware. The person does not lose any awareness throughout this seizure. That person might feel that they have butterflies in their tummy. They might have that smell or the taste or a deja vu sensation. There isn't anything physically there. There isn't a funny taste in their mouth. It's that abnormality where that seizure activity is occurring in one area of the brain that's causing them to feel and to sense that, but it physically isn't there, okay? So for some people, they will smell the oddest of things. And I worked with a woman who was constantly saying, okay, who's after burning that in the oven? What's going on? And her smell was chicken and chocolate mixed together. So it can be very peculiar. It's that smell. Nobody that I know of would cook chicken and chocolate together. But like that, that was the only thing that she had. And it took her a long number of years to be able to figure it out with tests to find out that she was having seizure activity, but she never was losing awareness during it. It was just that smell that she was getting. So that's the focal aware seizure. And for anybody looking at somebody that's having a focal aware seizure, there's physically no nothing that you could say is, oh, right, that's a focal episode. They're now focal aware seizure, because the person is still able to do, in most cases, what they were doing. So they might just stop for a minute when they get that sensation, but they don't lose awareness at all throughout the episode. Okay, the next one is the focal impaired, which used to be called the complex partial seizure, for anyone that's familiar with that term. So there is a larger area of that lobe. So the focal aware might be just a pinpoint of abnormality and electrical activity, whereas the focal impaired is the whole lobe of the brain is having a seizure, but the rest of the brain is working perfectly fine in the background, doing what it needs to do. So with a focal impaired seizure, the person might wander around, they could do really peculiar things. And I had a girl on the phone to me yesterday who she went to make a cup of tea, and then she went into a focal impaired seizure. And then when she came around a couple of minutes later, the kettle was missing. Okay, so where was the kettle? And it took them ages to figure out that she'd put the kettle into the fridge. So she was still doing something that made sense to her at the time, but it was just misplacing where the kettle was. She obviously was trying to get the milk out, and the kettle was in her hand, and that went into the fridge. So it can be something just like that, but you'd never notice. Some people will be tugging at their clothes or smacking their lips. So it's really whatever is normal for that person to do during their focal impaired, it will be dictated by the lobe of the brain where that focal seizure is happening at the time. Okay, so I will go into a bit more detail on the next slide just to kind of look at the different areas of the brain and what might be affected. But with the focal impaired seizure, it's important to remember that while they have lost a level of awareness, they're not completely unaware of what's going on. They may be able to respond to you, not verbally, but if you would say, come over here now, I want to have a chat with you, they will, in most cases, come over and stay beside you while you can have a chat with them. But if I was to ask each of you to say your name silently in your head, okay, so silently you say your name. If I was to ask you, what's the colour of your name? You're going to go, what are you talking about? It's kind of like that. There's a disturbance in how the information is being processed across the brain, and they're able to take in the command, but it doesn't make sense. You're asking me something completely stupid, but like that, it's so important with that person that even though they may not be able to verbally respond to you, you need to make sure that you stick with them until they're able to feed back that information, that you know that they've recovered from the seizure. And in a lot of cases, people with this, they could be able to say, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. Do you know where you are? Yeah. Where are you? And that's kind of when you know that they're able to process the information, make sense of it, and feed you back a response then, so that you know that they're actually fully aware of where they are again. Because in a lot of cases, kind of they'll say, yeah. But once you question a bit deeper, the brain is still recovering from the seizure episode. Okay. So there are the focal seizures. I have another slide that will cover a bit more on detail on the focal impaired, but I just want to mention the next one right beside it now at this stage. So that's focal to bilateral tonic-clonic. It's a mouthful, but what that used to be called is the secondary generalized. But what that means is that somebody has a focal seizure, whether it be a focal aware or a focal impaired seizure, and it goes on to being a generalized tonic-clonic after that. So that's when they have the tonic-clonic, and I will be going into a lot of detail on that seizure. So there are some people that their seizures start in one area and then they spread to the rest of the brain. Okay. So the generalized seizures, which is up there on the right-hand side, you can see the whole brain is highlighted in red. The whole brain is impacted by this seizure, and in the majority of cases, bar one, the person will lose awareness during the seizure. So they're not going to be responding to anything that you're saying, and they're not aware of what's going on, where they are, what's happening, and they will not remember the seizure episode itself. Okay, so they're all the different ones, and I will be covering all them on different slides, but it's just to show you that epilepsy, it's an umbrella term. You could have 10 people with epilepsy and they could all be sitting in different categories. So you could have somebody with a focal aware seizure, that's all they have, and you could have another person who only has tonic-clonic seizures or only has absent seizures, but yet they still have what is called epilepsy. But I suppose it's when you get into the nitty-gritty and you start describing what it is, that's when you get a better feel for what's happening with the person. But epilepsy is a very broad term, so it's just about knowing where you sit into this and what information you need to have to look after your family member or yourself. Okay, so when I was speaking about the partial seizures can happen in any lobe of the brain. The majority will be in the temporal lobe. So what happens in our temporal lobe? So they'd have a strange smell or taste, the altered behaviour, that lip smacking or the chewing movements. So they'd be quite common with somebody with temporal lobe. But our temporal lobe also looks after our emotions. So some people will get that fear, or they'll feel, oh my God, what's going on? There's something funny, like I can't describe it. So, but that is down to seizure activity. And some people with epilepsy, it could be years and years before they're diagnosed, because it's that altered behaviour where they have that panic or the dread, and it's an anxiety disorder, when in fact it's actually an abnormal electrical disturbance in one lobe that is causing them to have that sensation that isn't actually there. So if somebody was diagnosed with generalised anxiety and they're being treated for that, it's the wrong treatment, whereas an anti-epilepsy medication is what they actually need to dampen down that seizure activity. Okay, so that's the temporal lobe, and then the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. So it really just depends on where it is. The occipital lobe, somebody could see the flashy lights or spots moving on a wall or shapes, and that's down to what's being looked after in the occipital lobe is our vision. Okay, so it can be quite common for the person to feel nauseous when that's happening, because if anybody has ever had auras or anything of even migraine, it can be quite similar with that visual disturbance, but like that, they're able to pinpoint that it is an electrical disturbance of the neurons, sending a little burst of activity in there. So it's just important to know, if they tell you when you're being diagnosed where your seizures are starting, if they're focal seizures, that will dictate then what the sensation is that the person is feeling. Okay, so if somebody has the focal impaired seizure, so the one where they could be wandering around or smacking their lips, so just remember that their awareness may be altered, but it's not lost altogether. So what you want to do is keep them safe, guiding them away from any danger. So if you have somebody that, when they go into a focal impaired seizure, they start to wander out onto the road, trying to get into a car, they would not be able to sense the difference between being on the footpath or being out in front of the traffic. So it's important to keep them safe, guiding them, but be really calm while you're doing it and just talking to them as normal. Just because they're not maybe responding back to you the way you'd like to, their hearing is still working in most cases, and they're able to process a certain amount of information, but it's just not making sense. So stay with the person right through until you're able to get feedback that you know that they know where they are, they know what's going on, they know they've had a little episode, and just to make sure that they're safe, because for some people that is actually the start of them having a generalised seizure. So it could go from that focal episode into the generalised. So it's important that you stick with that person to make sure that you don't walk off and next thing they go down and they have a tonic-clonic seizure after that. Okay, so just stick with them. Okay, so with the absence, these are the generalised seizures now. So this is where the whole brain is impacted. And this is basically like the light switch goes off. There is no response from the person whatsoever, but there's no physical thing that you can see within them. So they literally have stopped doing whatever activity they were doing at the time. So it's obvious if they're doing something and they go into an absence, you'll be able to actually pinpoint it. But it's very hard to look at somebody and they could be daydreaming. Children do a lot of daydreaming, so it's very hard to actually say, well, that's an absence or that's not an absence. So it's only if what activity they're doing gets interrupted for the couple of seconds while they have the absence that you'll be able to pinpoint that is an actual absence. So if you were to call somebody when they look unresponsive, if they're daydreaming, they'll respond back to you. You'll kind of snap them out of it and they'll come back, because they're probably thinking of what they're going to get for their birthdays, what's going on later on. For me, I dream all day about food, what I'm going to have for my dinner, and I haven't even had breakfast yet. So that's a daydream episode. So if somebody was to interrupt me, I'd be able to go, oh, sorry, okay, what were you asking me? But with the absence, it can be quite obvious. And for some people, they might have one or two a day, but for children, they could be having numerous absence seizures and they're not being spotted. So it's important, if they're coming home from school or work, college, and they're saying, we've not covered this in school or in class, I don't know what they're asking me to do for homework, that could be an indication that they could be having some absent episodes. So it'd be well worth telling the teachers, letting them know that you think this might be happening, and could they just keep an eye out. But if you're a teacher and you have 30 children in a class, half of them are daydreaming anyway, so it's very hard to be able to say, well, that's exactly what it is. So I have a video here, and I hope it plays smoothly for you, and you will be able to see very clearly where the child was having the absence, but when she wasn't doing something, nobody spotted it. It wasn't until she was actually doing an activity that they could spot it. Okay, so I will press play, and I hope this is visible to you all. Okay, so that is the absent seizure. So I think it kind of shows very clearly when she was standing to the side and she wasn't taking part, she was going in and out of absences, but it wasn't until she had that rope in her hand and they were skipping with the rope and the hand was being dropped when she was having the absence episodes while she was doing something. Up until that, nobody would have spotted them until they actually seen that she was being interrupted by her activity that she was doing, which was pulling the rope and turning it around. Okay, so the next generalized seizure I'm going to talk you through is the tonic. So the tonic is one of the drop seizures. So this is where the muscles will stiffen and the person will fall over. So if you're standing up or if you're in a chair and everything stiffens, everything, basically you become like a log. If you're standing upright with the stiffening, the body will fall backwards. So the injuries from these drop seizures can be quite horrific because the person could go down, bang off the chair, bang off tables, everything on the way down. So sometimes the injuries are actually worse than the seizure itself, because with a tonic seizure, the recovery can be quite quick. So tonic seizures could be up for 20, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. So they're not generally a very long seizure. But when the muscles stiffen, everything stiffens. All the muscles around the brain and the heart and everything, they all stiffen. So it can be difficult for the person to breathe, and you would see that the person might go extremely pale or look like they're not getting in oxygen. But like that, if you were to check their pulse, which you don't need to do, but you would see that their heart is beating very regularly. So it's just that electrical burst of, throughout the brain. They lose consciousness, their muscles stiffen, and they fall over to the ground. So I'm not going to show a seizure on that type. But like that, there is the links here, and I will give this to Katie afterwards, so that she'll be able to pass it out to people if people want to actually follow the links and actually have a look at the videos. Okay. So the myoclonic is another generalized seizure, but the difference with this one is the person does not lose awareness. So, you know, when you're going to sleep at nighttime and you're ready to drop off, and next thing you get this jolt and your body jerks. It's a similar type of thing to that. There isn't anything wrong with you, but like that, it's like this involuntary muscle jerks. And in most cases, people who have myoclonic seizures, it's jerking of the limbs. So it could be just a quick jerk. If somebody's putting on lipstick, it could be in their eyeball, okay? If somebody is eating their breakfast, because usually these will happen when the person is tired. So you'll be looking at early in the morning, kind of later on in the day when the person is groggy, or for school kids, it could be towards the end of the school day. It's a long day. They're after putting their brain through so much work, and the involuntary jerks will happen then. So people have broken mirrors when they're brushing their teeth and the hand goes flying. And also hairbrush goes, the cornflakes are across the table in the morning, and it's really very much linked to tiredness. So the best thing for somebody with myoclonic seizures is to always make sure that they get plenty of rest and sleep very well, because that will minimize the amount of myoclonic jerks that they would have. So there's also a link there for a video if anybody wants to look at them. Okay, so the next generalized seizure is an atonic. So if you think back to the tonic, everything went really stiff. With the atonic, the person goes completely limp. So it's like Pinocchio, if he's on his strings and somebody cuts them strings across, he just literally collapses down like a ton of bricks. And when we go limp, because our head is so heavy in there, we literally will go face first, right down onto our face. The recovery is very quick. Normally by the time the person has hit the ground, they will come around. For some people, they will wear the protective headgear just because there's so many injuries around these drop attacks. But they go completely limp. It looks similar to a faint. But it's just about being able to pinpoint, is it actually an atonic episode that they're having? Because was there that burst of electrical activity? So they have to be able to pinpoint that was an electrical disturbance in the brain. Because like that, there are people that are really good at fainting, and they will faint at any stage, but they may feel it coming on and they'll know that it was a faint episode, but it can be very hard to distinguish between the two. So that's the atonic. The person falls and literally drops like a ton of bricks down onto the ground. Okay. So when you think of epilepsy, this is the seizure that everybody recognizes as epilepsy, whereas all the other ones have they're the same terminology. It's still called epilepsy, but this is the one that people would be more familiar with, which is the tonic-clonic seizure. Okay, so what can happen? For some people, they'll get an aura, they're warning. It could be that smell, the taste, the sensation of, oh God, it's something funny is going on here. I don't know what it is, can't pinpoint it. But not everybody gets the warning. These are the people who would have the focal episode, and then goes on to a further episode. If somebody generally has tonic-clonic seizures, they may still get that aura or the warning, but they don't get the tonic-clonic after it. If the person is getting the warning and they're saying, well, no, I didn't have the seizure, the aura in itself is a seizure because it's a focal episode that the person is having. So it's important to note that in the seizure diary so that you're able to tell the team when you go back into your appointment, well, look, we've had 2 auras, we've had 5 auras, we didn't have a tonic-clonic seizure. Okay, so the tonic-clonic seizures might be well controlled with the medication, but the auras, there's still a little bit of bursts of electrical activity going on that the team, the more information they have, the better. Because even a lot of people don't recognize the aura as that little seizure beforehand. So it's important to kind of get that message across. And with young children, it can be very hard for them to actually even verbalize what they're feeling during that. So it's not until they get a bit older that they're able to tell you what they're feeling beforehand. But if the person gets an aura, it's actually really good because you can get them safe, you can look after them, you can maybe get them to the floor or get them to lie down before the actual tonic-clonic happens. Okay, so the next stage is the active part of the tonic-clonic. So this is where you start timing the seizure. You don't time it from the warning sign or the aura, you're timing it from the tonic. The person is going to stiffen, they'll fall over, or if they're in a chair, they could be stiffened up and the arms might come up along with the legs. So the breathing stops at the beginning during the tonic phase. And the reason for that is because the muscles are just so tight that their lungs are not able to fill the way they normally would. So, but like that, the tonic is usually the quickest part of the seizure. And then the body goes into the clonic, which is where the muscles are jerking, the breathing returns, but it can be very noisy, it can be horrible. And it's so horrible to look at your child or your family member having a tonic-clonic seizure because you can feel so helpless. They're going through it, but they have absolutely no awareness from the time the tonic phase right through to the clonic. They have lost awareness and they don't know where they are or what's going on. So it's keeping them safe, and we will do the first aid on that as well. And then after the clonic is when the person the body goes limp. They can be drowsy, they can be confused, and for some people, the recovery from a tonic-clonic seizure could be a couple of hours. They may be able to verbalise and feed back information to a certain extent after a few minutes, but they're just going to be extremely drowsy because the body has gone through so much during the tonic-clonic episode that they are absolutely worn out. So it's like running a marathon, you haven't trained for it. The muscles can be sore, they could have banged themselves on the way down. So the recovery can take a bit of time. And the important thing is to allow the person to recover to whatever is normal for them and just going with it and letting them sleep and rest through it. Okay. So I'm going to show you a video of a tonic-clonic seizure, and I really like this video because you can clearly see where we went from the tonic, the stiffening, and then the jerking, and then into the recovery as well. So you can see the stages of the seizure from the active tonic-clonic and then into the recovery. So it's very clear in this video. So I'm going to play the video here now, and I will stop talking. Two, two, three, four. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4, 2, 3, 4. 5, 3, 4, 6, 2, 3. The ending. Why are you all coming up at different times? You know that last week we were going to come together. You know that ridiculous. 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so you can really see the difference between the different stages from the tonic, the stiffening, and into the clonic, where you had the jerking and then the recovery. And the length of seizure that girl had would be quite common for times of tonic-clonic seizures. Most tonic-clonic seizures are usually over and done with within a minute to a minute and a half. Okay, so it is quite accurate from the time, even though looking at the video you may feel that that was 5, 6, 7 minutes long. It was actually only about 60 seconds, that seizure, from the tonic right through to the end of the clonic and into recovery then. So you're timing it from the start of the tonic right through to when the clonic phase, where the jerking starts to settle down. So once it's settled down and the body is relaxed, that's when you'll stop timing the seizure. Okay, so I hope everybody's doing okay. If there's any questions that you want, there is a Q&A box there that you can put information into, or what your questions are, and we will hopefully get time then to answer whatever specific queries you have as best as we can today. And if not, I can come back to people as well if you want further information. So what's the treatment for epilepsy? So what they will primarily do is start somebody on anti-epileptic drugs. So they're also shortened to AEDs. And what they want to do is have one drug with no side effects and basically keep the dose to the lowest amount that will manage the seizures and also minimize the amount of side effects. But it can be very difficult to actually achieve that. And so some people may experience side effects. And some of the common side effects, it can be related to the dose. For some people, they're short-lived and they get over the side effects and they settle down after a couple of weeks of starting the medication, and the body is able to tolerate it better. But for some people, the side effects can be prolonged and they can keep going on for months and months. And if you notice that this is what's happening to your cells and they're really not suiting you, the medication, they may look at changing the medication to something different to treat it better and hopefully manage the seizures as well. So for some people, they'll be tired, dizziness, headache, constipation, visual disturbances, unsteadiness, and then there is mood change for some people that are on a specific medication. So Keppra is a brilliant drug, and about 10% of people would experience change to the mood of the person. So you could be a very placid, laid-back person, and the medication Keppra starts, and 3 months later, it's like you're a tyrant in the house. You're very short fuse. So if it's something that is really difficult to manage, let the epilepsy nurses know, and they will be able to work around getting the best dosing and also the best medication to treat that, because like that, epilepsy in itself should not cause behavioural problems to that extent. So it's about figuring it out. Is it the medication or is it something unrelated to that? But keep a note of side effects that you may notice, and do they settle down over time? And some people, they will have settled down within the first couple of weeks of starting on the medication and getting to the dose that you need to be at. Okay. So what could trigger a seizure? So a trigger is not a cause of your epilepsy. A trigger is something that causes the actual episode to happen. Okay. So for some people, it's missing medication. So if you are on anti-epilepsy drugs, they have to be taken very specifically at the times and how you're actually prescribed them. So if somebody is prescribed to take their medication twice a day, you space it out 12 hours apart. So if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, it's 8 o'clock at night. If it's 9 in the morning, it's 9 at night. It's not, you get up tomorrow at 10 o'clock and I'll take it at 10 o'clock. And then I'm not going to bed until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I've been out and I'm not bringing the medication with me. That's not going to help around managing the seizures. So the best way to get control of the seizures is to take the medication correctly, which is 12 hours apart. If it's a 24-hour medication you're on and you only have to take 1 dose a day, take it at exactly the same time every day. And if you're out and about and you still would take it at the time that you're meant to take it, because you don't want the medication to dip in your system so that you may be exposed to that trigger that you could have a seizure. So for some people, this is the only tweak that they need. They're still having seizures, but when they look at their way of taking their medication and what way they're taking it Monday to Friday at 8 and 8. They get up on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, or they get up on Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they take it. And then they're exposing themselves to the possibility of having a seizure. So it's just very well managed. Set an alarm every day of the week at a certain time. Use an app that will help you to remember the medications, because memory can be something that people struggle with who have hydrocephalus and also epilepsy. So use the reminders, use the smartphones to make sure that your medication is taken exactly as you're meant to take it. For some people then, lack of sleep. So if you've been out at a wedding, I know there's not many going on at the minute, but like that, just that lack of sleep, or you're feeling unwell and your sleep is disturbed and you were up and down going to the bathroom at night, or coming down getting a drink, or coming down to get paracetamol because your head was thumping. So just that lack of sleep or the disturbance of your sleep can trigger a seizure. And I think it's important, if you are going to be traveling, going to whatever country, like years ago, I would always have said, if you were traveling to Spain and you're like me, you will buy them cheap flights that go out first thing in the morning. So you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you've only slept for a couple of hours. Somebody with epilepsy, that is not the best flight time to go on. So it's kind of get a later flight, because you want to have your sleep beforehand. Or you go to bed very early the day before and you have everything prepared so that when you do get up in the middle of the night, that you've already had your full night's sleep. Okay, so just manage that. And even going through time zones and things like that. If you're going away to Australia, that works out brilliantly because you've got the 12-hour gap in the time. So you can stay on your same routine. But if you're going to New York and it's a 5-hour difference, if you're only going for a few days or for a week, continue to take it at the routine of what you take it at home, rather than going over there and taking it at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock at night, American time. So keep to your own time frame. Or likewise, going across to Europe and they're a couple of hours ahead, still keep it at your usual time as well. So stress can be a big thing for people with epilepsy. It can trigger seizures. We all get stressed. There is good stress, there's bad stress, and where we want to be is kind of in the middle of all of that, because we can't eliminate all stresses in our life. And with children, you will see that their stress can be different, because that good stress that they have around Christmas and Santa's coming and communions and confirmations and all the big events and going to sleepovers and friends' houses or a friend coming over to play, that can be enough to trigger a seizure. And it's that excitement, and the brain is getting excited, and then there could be a seizure as a result of that. So it's just to be aware that that can happen. So it's trying to keep them calm and everything is going okay, and managing the stress levels and the excitement as well. So with some young girls, the time of the month, the hormone changes around their period can actually trigger seizures. So for some people, if you're keeping your seizure diary and you notice it's only these couple of days every month and you're able to pinpoint it to the menstrual cycle, that could be a good thing to feed back to the team, because they may be able to tweak the medication around that so that they minimize that trigger of the hormone changes in the body. So just to be aware of it, manage a seizure diary, keep looking at it and seeing, is it linked to this? Because for some people, in the early stages or even years into the diagnosis, they may not be able to pinpoint what the specific triggers are. So the more information you note and you take down, the better it will be to manage the seizures. Okay, so the next one on the list is photosensitivity. So this is very much an old myth around epilepsy, that if you have a diagnosis of epilepsy, you can't go to the cinema, you can't go to concerts. But there's only 3 to 5% of people with a diagnosis of epilepsy that are triggered by the lights or the flashing strobe lights. So it's a very small amount of people, and I think we need to really bust that myth, because it is such a small amount. So when they're doing the EEGs in the early stages of finding out what is the trigger for this person, they have flashed the lights as part of the EEG. So they're able to tell you from that EEG if you are photosensitive. But for somebody who's photosensitive, driving along in a car and it's a very sunny day and there's trees along the road and that light from the sun coming between the trees, that can trigger a seizure in somebody who's photosensitive. So if you are photosensitive, you would be informed by the hospital, but in a lot of cases they never even mention it, because not many people actually have the photosensitivity linked to their epilepsy. Okay, so the last couple there is alcohol can be a trigger for some people, and it's not usually when the person is actually out drinking, it's when the alcohol is leaving their system that they could have the seizure. So they could have been out on the Friday or the Saturday, had a few drinks, and it might be Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon when they have the seizure activity. And some people will say, no, I don't have an issue, it's not a trigger because it doesn't happen while I'm out on the night out or whatever, or at the wedding. It's the next day that it happens. But that is actually when it happens, is the following day, when the alcohol is being processed and getting put out of the body. Okay, so with epilepsy, it's very important to keep everything in routine. We spoke about the medication, but it's also important to eat at regular times. Don't let yourself get over hungry. Don't let yourself get over full. So it's just manage everything in moderation. So eat well, drink well, look after yourself, and sleep is a really important thing. And then just also be aware that some people have triggers that are very individual to themselves. Some people it could be coffee, other people it could be MSG, and in Chinese takeaways there's MSG and everything in a lot of crisps and snack food. It's added in there, so that could be a trigger for people. So it's trying to look at what happened before the seizure episode to see, are you able to pinpoint what there's a possible trigger there. All right, okay. So I'm coming up towards the end of this presentation here now, but what do you do if a seizure is going to happen? So just be aware that there isn't anything that you can do to stop the actual seizure from happening. So you just need to let it take its course, and you need to protect the person, also protect yourself, and If they're injured, you're going to look after them and make sure that you can do but what is in your capability to do. So you're not going to go in and perform stitches on your child's face or on your family member's face. So you do what you're capable of doing. But the really important part of it, when you're managing a seizure, it's staying as calm as you can and knowing what you're doing. I'll be showing the next slide is going through the steps. And this is what you need to do to manage the seizure from your perspective as the carer. Okay, so stay as calm as possible. So this slide, there's a lot of points here, but on the do's, you're noting the time. So what time did that person's body stiffen? So as best you can, you need to note the time from the tonic right through to the end of the clonic where the jerking stops. You're going to clear the space around them. So if the person has fallen down and there's chairs and there's tables, you'll clear the chairs and tables away, or you'll clear the school bags or whatever is in the way. Clear that and you'll cushion the head. So the number one thing is to remember that you want to protect that head, because with the clonic phase where there's the jerking, that person is going to be banging their head, maybe their face on the ground or off something hard. So you need to protect the head from any injury. So you can use a cushion, a pillow, you can use a cardigan, a jumper. But if you're out and about and the weather is really fine, or you don't have anything to actually do it, you can use your hands. So you just cup your hands under it and allow your hands to take the impact of the clonic stage of the seizure. So if I was to have a seizure, these would have to come off, because I have walked into door frames sideways and banged off that. And I tell you, the bruises that you get on your nose are horrific and really painful. So if they've glasses on, take them off. If they've anything tight up around their neck, just loosen it up. And I think the really important one for yourselves is, if your family member is a wheelchair user, do not open the straps on the wheelchair if they're in the wheelchair when the seizure starts. You'll loosen the belts, but keep them on. And the reason that you'd loosen the belts is so that they have that bit of extra space for the jerking part of the seizure. So they're not going to get injured. They're quite safe to have the seizure in there, and just protecting the head. So you're holding onto it up here just to stop them from damaging their neck and their head. Okay, so loosen the straps. And I know from experience of working in Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Ireland that for some people it can be really, they don't like wearing the strap, the lap belts, but it's so important from a safety point of view that they are secure in the chair. If it's a young child and they're in a buggy or in the car seat, you will loosen the straps and let them have the seizure in the car seat or in their specialized seats that they're in. Okay, so if it's possible, during the tonic-clonic, get the person onto their side from a drainage point of view. If the person's in a wheelchair, you can hold them and keep their head, okay? So that's not as big a deal. But if the person is mobile and they're down on the ground, get them onto their side if possible. And that will open up the airways as well, because when they move over onto the side, the tongue drops down and it relaxes and opens up the airways. And just to let you know, if the person won't swallow their tongue, you're hearing that convulsion, and the tongue, being a big strong muscle, is moving across the back of the throat. So that's what that sound is. So if they're on their side, that's not going to be happening. So it is really to help with the drainage of saliva, and for some people they'll bite the inside of their cheek and it'll be really sore. So it's just to allow for that to drain away. And I think one of the harder things is if you're in a family and the seizure happens in front of other people, or in front of young children, or any child or any person who's not familiar with it, it can be really difficult to do the reassuring. The person having the seizure is completely unaware, but if the person around, the people around that are looking at it, can be more impacted by it, because the person having the seizure has no idea what's going on during the seizure. Okay, so just to recap on the do's. So note the time from the start of the tonic right through to clonic, clear the space, cushion the head, loosen the straps on the wheelchair or the specialized seat, don't open them, and get them to their side, but protecting that head from any injury as much as possible. Okay, so on the don'ts, you're not going to put anything into the mouth, because like that, in the tonic-clonic seizure, the jaws are going to be clenched. Okay, so you're going to lose a finger. People have put car keys into people's mouths, they put wallets and everything, because they think that historically people were told you're going to swallow your tongue. And even nurses of a certain generation used to carry around a spatula in their pockets, so that as soon as somebody went into a seizure, they were jamming that in, but the jaws are going to be clenched. So you're not putting anything in there. The only exception would be the buccal, that if the person has a longer seizure and they have the emergency medication, that's the only exception. But like that, it's not going in behind the teeth. It's not going into the oral cavity. It's going into the buccal cavity. It's where it's going in. So it's on the outside of the cheek, or on the outside of the teeth into the cheek. So when the person comes around from the seizure, you're not going to give them anything to eat or drink until you know that they've fully recovered after the seizure. So give them a bit of time to recover before you offer them something to eat or drink then. And while they're having the seizure and while the jerking is going on, you don't need to restrict or restrain any of the movement, because you could get injured, but also you could hurt the person because their body is jerking. And if you put any extra resistance on them, it can actually do them more damage than good. So it's just allow that seizure to take its course and for them to go through it. And I think as a parent, if you're seeing your child or your family member going through a tonic-clonic seizure, the instinct is that we get down to protect them. And we want to help them, we want to stop this, but we can't stop it. So we just follow the stages and don't restrain them. And they're completely unaware of what's going on. And never move the person unless they're in somewhere that's really dangerous, okay? So unless they're gone down and they're beside an open fire or water or things like that. So don't move them unless you really, really have to move them. Okay, so that's the do's and don'ts of the tonic-clonic seizure. Okay, so afterwards, so if you are diagnosed with epilepsy, it's so important to keep a diary of the seizure activity. And if the person's still unconscious, that's the time to do it. So write down exactly as you've seen. Don't worry about the terminology, but just describe what physically happened. And it's also important to give a bit of information over what was going on beforehand, what happened during the seizure, which was what you physically seen, that description, and then the afterwards, so how the recovery was after it. So before, during, and after the seizure. And record as much information as you can, because the more information that you can feed back to the team, the better they are able to treat the epilepsy when it's happening. Okay. So another important thing would be, when do you call an ambulance? So if the seizure lasts for longer than 5 minutes, they would say call an ambulance, because if the brain is still seizing at 5 minutes, chances are it's not going to stop itself. The majority of seizures, well over 90% of seizures, will start and stop themselves without you needing to do anything bar the first aid and the do's and the don'ts. But if the seizure is going on for 5 minutes, call an ambulance. Another reason to call an ambulance would be if one seizure follows another one and there's no break in between. That's the brain has gone into a pattern of seize, stop, seizing and stopping. So that is not going to stop without emergency intervention. So that would be an emergency where you'd call the ambulance for that as well and head into hospital so that they can get the seizures back under control. So if your child or family member has what looks like a seizure, but they don't have a diagnosis, on the first seizure, you'll ring an ambulance. And after that, then once you have the information, the chances are that you won't need to call an ambulance every time that the person has a seizure. So you get more confident in actually managing the seizures at home. Okay, the next point is if they've injured themselves. So if they've fallen or they've gashed their face and they've split open on the arm or whatever, you'll call an ambulance if there's an injury. And another important one would be if they were drinking at the time that they went into a seizure. You don't know if they got to swallow the water or the drink, or if that went into their lungs. Okay, so it's important to call an ambulance straight away if that happens. But the really important thing to take from it, if there's any reason that you are going, this is not what's normal for us, we don't normally have this type of a seizure, it's very different, and you're doubting yourself and you're saying, oh, this is not okay, what I'm seeing, call the ambulance straight away and don't second guess yourself, because usually your gut instinct is bang on. So go with your gut instinct on it. Okay. So if your child is in school, the school will have a policy on how to manage seizures. And we also do epilepsy awareness training for schools. And we, at the minute, are doing it over Zoom, which works out really well. And the teachers are really engaging that way with us for the epilepsy awareness training. So we can support you with that. If you have your school in the area and they could do with some epilepsy awareness training, get in touch with me or the person in your region. So we also do training on the administration of emergency medication for the professionals. So let's say your SNAs or your teachers in the school, care workers out in the community, PAs, things like that, they can come and do the emergency medication training on the bucculum. And that is certified so that they are then able to go and hopefully administer it then themselves through the policy of the company that they work for or the school. So for training, come back to us. We also have an education information pack, and in that there is a detailed template of a care plan. Now it is specific to epilepsy, but it can be a good way of actually communicating your child's needs to the school. And so that care plan is there, and you can get that information off our website, and it's under Epilepsy Education Information Pack is the name of that. And also you need the protocol. So if your child or you're prescribed buccal, you'll need to have a protocol as to who is being given it, what you're being given, why and when. So that'll just cover the prescription of the buccal and when it's to be used. Okay. So in the care plan for the school or for the workplace or whatever, because it can be used in all different areas, what you're putting in that is the description of the seizure. So what it looks like, you don't have to even use the seizure terminology. It's more the description of the type of seizures episodes that they have. Also, it's important for them to know how frequent the seizures are. Are they once a month? Are they once a year? Are they 3 times a day? So the more information you have around the seizure frequency from managing the diary of their seizures in the past, you can give an indication as to what way you think the seizures will be moving forward. What is the normal length of time for their seizures? Is it 1.5 minutes? Is it 20 seconds? So normal duration of the seizure, and usually what the pattern for one person is the same with each seizure, that is the same. So if it's a tonic-clonic seizure and they're generally over and done with in 90 seconds, chances are that's what you're going to see each time, and it'll take the same course and same pattern each time. So you'll also be noting the triggers. So for some people, they will have specific triggers, which is missing medication, excitement in young children. So what potential triggers there are. And with the schools, they will also need to know, is there any activities that need to be avoided? In a lot of cases, there isn't any, but in the early stages of the diagnosis, they may say, well, look, don't ride a bike, don't go swimming. And then it'll be as they get an idea of the pattern of the seizures and the frequency that they will be able to say, right, okay, you can go back swimming, or you can go back riding the bike, but do it in a safe way, okay, and bring somebody with you, and always let the lifeguard know that they have a history of seizures as well. So, and just keep in touch with the school the whole time, or with the workplace, just letting them know how things are in general, and review that care plan every year. Sometimes there's changes to medication. As the child is growing, they may have to increase their doses, and sometimes you'll see the side effects coming back in. So just review it as often as you can. But generally, people would do it at this stage in the year, and that will do for the year, because there might not be any changes in that. And then come next year, there may be something has changed, or you can just review it, or it's good to go and keep going with it then. So that's really it. That, and I suppose use our website as much as you need for extra information. I've mentioned the Epilepsy Education Information Pack, but also Epilepsy Action in Australia have some really lovely cartoon videos if you wanted to show them to your children, to actually try to explain what epilepsy is and managing the seizures. And they have really, really good resources there, and they have comic books for older children that they can actually learn more about their epilepsy, and it explains it really, really well to them. So use the information as much as you need to. So now I'm going to come out of this. Don't see. Okay. So I'll stop sharing there now. So, okay. Is there any questions? Okay. So somebody asked, how long would that seizure be for Edel? So I'm not sure which seizure that the person is asking about.
Now, that may have been the tonic. Yeah, that's when I spotted it coming in, but that may not have been the one. Apologies.
Okay. And it really depends on what has been normal for the person up until up until now. So if their seizures were generally 30 seconds for a tonic seizure, chances are it's going to be the exact same each time that they have a seizure. Okay, so it's just look at the past, look at the seizure profile that the person had, and then give them an idea. Katie, I'm only seeing something that there was no sound.
That was just for one of the videos. I think the other video did have a sound. But you could see the picture, and it was the one with the girl and the skipping rope, so the absent seizure.
Okay.
But I think the video explained it anyway. There's 2 other questions coming up there for you. One of them was a personal question that you may want to answer separately about when I start back at college, should I tell my course director about my epilepsy?
Yes, definitely. I would inform them just so that they know what to do in the event of you having a seizure in college. So, and use the care plan template out of the education pack to actually fill in the information. And the more information they have, the better, because then they can get the support. Going back into your course, if they need to do some epilepsy awareness training and the first aid for seizures, there's no problem with myself or some of my colleagues, depending on the area that they're in, doing that with the college course or with the instructors as well in the college if needs be. So we would do that training right through from creches, childminders, up to colleges and even into workplaces. We do that training.
Now, there is one other question there. What is the usual dosage of medication that is given?
That is dictated by the seizure frequency, the seizure control. So that's very much a medical question that people will ask. Depending on the doses, it really is dependent on how frequent their seizures are and also side effects. So they will keep the person on the lowest medication possible, the lowest dose, in order to manage the seizures. So, but like that, each hospital in Ireland, throughout the country, they will have an epilepsy nurse linked to them. So questions like that, you can ask the epilepsy nurses. They have the phone lines and you can ring in the morning and they'll come back to you. But I think there is no, let's say, normal or standard amount of medication. You could have 3 people all on the same medication, but on completely different doses, because that's what they need to keep the seizures under control. So it's very much individual to each person.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for answering those questions and for the brilliant presentation. I think I've seen it before, but I learned something new again this time. So thank you very much, Edel. I'm going to stop the recording now, but thank you. I want to thank you for giving up your time and for presenting for us.
No problem.